Hey there, and welcome to Alive inside the Radiantly Alive Woman. We are inside our women's only Facebook community where we are all very interested in scars and how they are affecting our well-being. Inside this Facebook group, we're always talking about the physical health as well as the emotion and our energetic health. So over the past 5 months, we have been exploring one scar at a time. I've been doing 2 a week. And that is coming to a close. We're almost done this. We're going to have about 9 or 10 more videos, and then that'll be it. After that, we'll have almost 50 videos, 50 different scars. You can find all of this inside this Facebook group. Potentially an easier, more organized way to see it if you find the group to be a little bit challenging to find what you need. You can go onto my YouTube channel, Kendra Tootil, the Radiantly Alive Woman. I have it all kind of categorized in areas of the body, the exact same way this group is categorized under the guides. So important to me is that when you are watching these videos or when you see announcements of these coming up, that you invite women who have these scars on their body into this group so that they can benefit from this information as well. And all of this information is given out for free, not just education and info, but also actionable steps that you can take to move forward on your transformation journey. So beginning October 1st, I'm going to have a very exciting announcement for you. We're changing it up. We're adding some new things, and I'm going to keep that a secret for the next couple weeks, and I will announce all of that new and exciting stuff on the 1st of October. There's actually 2 things that I want to share with you that I'm just cooking up and getting slowly organized as we finish out the month of September. Another exciting thing about the month of September is we have started our very first group women's program called the Enliven program. So yesterday we finished our 3rd week. It's a group program for women who have scars on their body who want to learn about holistic well-being, particularly from these 4 different keystones. We have our touch keystone, nourish, move, and breathe. So every month we focus on one keystone and we learn a practice to really enliven our lives, our well-being, reach our health goals, and work on our transformation by using scars as one of the main entry points. There's a lot of stuff in this year-long program, and it's really nice to have women in that group. There's 19 of us going along in the year. This program is going to re-enter in the month of January. We're going to have a whole new group of women, another 20 women who are going to go on this same year-long journey. So stay tuned for more information about that. But first, why we're here is we're here to learn about a specific scar that's quite common. It's common in men and women, but here we are in a group of women, so let's understand it from a woman's perspective. A lot of this can be translated into the physical and energetic considerations that men could be feeling in their body as well. So please feel free to share this with the men in your life. It's totally relatable to them. So what we do in these 3 videos is we talk about 3 specific sections. We talk about things that you may be experiencing physically. So I help women understand that the scars they have on their body are contributing to how they feel. So I help kind of highlight that, like the things that you are feeling. Did you know that they were related to your scar? So we are going to talk about the physical things that you may be experiencing, obviously, especially if you have a discectomy scar, which is the scar that we're going to be doing. If I hadn't announced that yet or not, we're doing spinal discs, people who've had discectomies in somewhere in their vertebral column. Maybe most commonly the low back, but it can kind of happen anywhere. Not really the thoracic spine. Either the neck or the back is probably a better way to talk about that. After we talk about the physical, we go into the emotion and the energetic considerations that you want to think about in how you feel on a day-to-day that, again, trace back to your scar. You probably or may not know that what you're feeling is relatable to your scars, and that's where I help and connect the dots. And then the 3rd thing that we're going to do is the what to do. That's the actionable steps. I'm going to give you something that you can do with all scars as well as something you can do specifically for this scar, having a discectomy. So let's jump right in and just talk about why they happen and where they are commonly on the body. And this surgery has changed quite significantly over the decades. Obviously so, we are always making modern medical advancements, and now the incisions are quite small. Some of them are being done with laser, so they're moving towards looking like a minor surgery. And this is good, obviously so, because back in the day, it was not such a minor surgery. It was, there's a lot of potential complications and usually bigger scars, gnarlier scars, and all of that is starting to change, which is really great. However, I want to make it clear that the scar that you see, the physical scar that you see on your body, it does not mean that if you have a nice, neat scar, that it's not contributing to your your health challenges. It could be a very small scar, it could be a very big scar, it could be a scar that was done nice and neat with beautiful stitching and a really good surgeon. It could be a totally gnarly scar that's caught and bound up in your body. What we want to consider is not just how it looks, but where it's latched and glued onto. It has an anchoring onto bone, which is something I often talk about and help you to understand. As the wound is healing, it's searching and looking for bone to latch onto. And so where that is in the low back or in the neck, like I had just said, there's a lot of bone there. Not only is there a lot of bone, but there's a lot of stuff. It's a very intricate area, which is one of the reasons why it is still kind of a dangerous surgery to have, because you right next door are some very important things that not only give you nerve impulses and help your muscles move, but help you to feel your body, help you to have motor control of certain parts of your body wherever you're having a discectomy. And so there's a lot of that, as well as the fluids. There's tons of vascularity in the area. There's a lot of dense fibrotic tissue, because this area is the part of your body that keeps you upright and erect as a human. So how can these scars actually happen, or how can these surgeries, like what's the kind of path that people commonly take where they need to eventually get this type of surgery? It could be an acute injury, something that happens generally with quite a bit of force, like a car accident or some other type of fast accident where there was quite a significant blow and it damaged the disc in some way. There's varying degrees of disc damage. Sometimes the damage is very minimal and you can work with a therapist or work with movement or work with particular types of modalities, and that disc can be resolved and kind of pushed back into its place. It's like a disc is like the Oreo filling of an Oreo sandwich, if you know that treat, that cookie. So you have a vertebral body here, so a level of your spinal column. Then you also have the same thing here, a vertebral vertebrae, and then in between each vertebrae, you have a disc. It's a kind of gelatinous, squishy like substance, ideally, and it maintains its integrity of that squishiness when there is proper movement there, which means there's proper articulation, which means all the tendons, ligaments, and connective tissue are getting the right kind of interaction, meaning like the tug is like there's a lot of good, healthy tugging and tension and all of that kind of stuff is going on, which then therefore means that there's a lot of good muscle movement. And what does that mean as a knock-on of that? There's a good amount of range of motion. There's a healthy amount of range of motion in the area. When we have problems of any type, a disc problem at the end of the day chronically could happen for a variety of different reasons. It could be a postural thing. So you could over time break down the health of the disc, break down the health of the neighboring vertebrae just by being sedentary, which closes down all the stuff I just spoke about. It dehydrates the disc. It obviously, so there's not a lot of movement happening there. And when there's not a lot of movement happening, the spiral effect is all of the stuff that I just spoke about. Not a lot of movement into the connective tissue, into the tendons. They get much more adaptable and a lot less resilient. And what happens when all of that is going on is the joint may not be articulating accurately or in an appropriate way. So we want like really good bone on bone stacking. We want the bones to be one on top of the other, like that Oreo sandwich, and able to do, particularly in the spine, 6 different movements, 6 different ranges, which are flexing the spine, extending the spine, side bending it one way, side bending it the other, rotating it one way, rotating it the other way. Those are the movements that are available in the spine, in the low back, in the thoracic spine, as well as the neck. And if we're not moving, which a lot of people no longer move, or at least don't move well, over time that can create degeneration. It can create, disc degeneration, arthritic-like kind of grinding away at the bone kind of integrity, which creates a lot of pain and could really challenge the integrity of the disc. So what does that mean? Over time, if you were not in the acute camp of having an accident, then there's going to be this slow kind of breaking down process that is not ideal, that eventually will lead to a discectomy. So that is something to consider in the way, not only like your reasoning for having this type of surgery, but your way out to better health. If you've just had a discectomy, that means that there is some challenge in the body. Of course, you had to have the surgery. The next stage, if this gets ignored or not worked on appropriately, or there's not a degree of rehab that goes on, there could be a spiraling effect that happens, which is commonly like a fusion, where the disc is just, not good at all. It's totally dried up. It's not useful. There's a lot of pain in the area because it's kind of like bone on bone. Everything that I just mentioned previously is just a worse off version. And so the only kind of method to maintain the integrity of the area without damaging more important vital structures like the spinal column and the nerves, which supply, your leg function or your arm function, depending on where the problem is, your bladder and bowel function and all of this, it's crucial to living life as a human. So what they'll do is they'll do a fusion where they fuse two of these vertebrae together so that that doesn't happen. You have like that safety net. So that's typically why these surgeries are happening if you've had one. Hopefully that rings true for you. And I want you to think about where you could be potentially going if you don't take some good progressive methods around how to resolve this, so you don't end up in lumbar fusion area. It's not the end of the world if you have a lumbar fusion. Of course, there's many healthy people who have these types of surgeries and are perfectly fine, but it does start to limit and restrict and kind of box you into a corner where you have less and less kind of mobility, less and less health in the area, and it's kind of it's a much more quicker breaking down thing that's going to happen once you get into those types of surgeries. All right, so enough of that. Let's go into the physical considerations. So if you have this scar on your back, I want you to think about, as I'm speaking these physical considerations, I want you to think about yourself, obviously, and recognize if you have some of these things going on. There's a lot of things that could be going on. The main ones that I want to talk about are breathing problems, like breathing challenges. A lot of people don't even really recognize that they have a breathing challenge, so I'll just kind of highlight that for you. It's often called like a breathing dysfunction. I don't really like the word dysfunction because it feels bad. It feels really intense and kind of rigid as a thought process. It's just a breathing problem, meaning acknowledge that it's there and then work to resolve it through these methods that I have inside my system. The other thing that I want to talk about is chronic pain, particularly in the back of the body. The posterior chain is just the whole back of the body, the kind of extensor chain, everything that keeps us upright and extended as human beings, but also the stuff like the back of the pelvis, the hamstrings, the knees, calves, Achilles, underneath of the foot, all the way up to like the top of your head, that whole kind of sweep of tissue. Then I want to talk about pressure problems. One thing that I talk a lot about is I don't really like labeling things. Labeling and diagnoses are awesome. They give us a huge advantage. They help us understand and validate what we've been going through. But at one point they can become limiting because we kind of identify with them and we get stuck there. And once we have our label, like say we have a diagnosis or we have a label or an identification, whatever, we still don't have an answer about how to resolve that, or we don't have that much information. Maybe there's things that we can go off of, especially because a discectomy is more of a common type of surgery. So there's a lot of kind of just protocol-like methods, but those don't necessarily work for everyone. Because in my world, the scars that you have on your body mixed with your own personal timeline, mixed with your own goals, are what makes the magical sauce on actually working to resolve these long-standing issues. So pressure problems we'll touch on because that helps us break down the idea that we have diagnoses and labels and things wrong with us. Actually, it's a pressure problem, and the pressure problem may be because of the surgery site, but you may be experiencing pressure problems away from that. So we'll talk about that. The other thing is digestive health. So common when you have back surgeries. Digestive health is on your radar for sure, and that's going to be inclusive of bowel function, as well as, let's just toss in bladder function as well, because they'll all be related and hooked up into the pressure problem that I was talking about. So let's just talk primarily around breathing. So right now there's so much stuff around breathing. There's a lot of information. It can kind of feel overwhelming. So let's just cut through it just to understand the physical stuff that you could be feeling in your body. Right now we know that if you have a breathing problem, you will be experiencing challenges in your respiratory system, maybe not now, but in the future, as well as your circulatory system, your heart health. All of these things can be impeded. And what does it actually feel like if you have a breathing problem? You'll feel vulnerability at your low back. You may feel a challenge to actually take in a full breath. You may feel like it's very easy for you to get overloaded and stressed out, like slip into overwhelm and worry and anxiety, because your breath is already kind of hindered. You're not having the kind of open, full, deep, smooth breath that's the diaphragm use starts to put us into. Most people don't have a good connection to their diaphragm. And what the diaphragm is it's part of this kind of intrinsic, I want you to visualize it like a party balloon, really, which is what we're going to talk about when we get into pressure problems. But if you think about the diaphragm being like the top of the lid, the pelvic floor being the bottom, and then your abdomen, as well as the sides of your body and your back, kind of just creates that balloon-like thing. So when all of that, or even a part of that, is not working well, then you're going to feel repercussions everywhere, because we are not little pieces. We are not like segmental things. It's easy for us to talk about digestive health and respiratory health, but actually everything's working together. And when one thing is hindered or impeded, there's a cascade of stuff that happens. So when we are not breathing well, you will almost always feel low back like pain. You will have a challenge to feel like a stable, solid core. That's really common what people will say. They'll say they feel like they have a weak core. This is a very common kind of complaint. What does a weak core feel like? It could feel like at any moment you have that like niggly-like feeling where your back could go out, or it could spasm, or you reach down and grab your purse, or you reach up for something, or you do something quite small or something you do often, and it tosses your back out. This is because of pressure problems, and also just the breathing kind of apparatus is not in a good place. Something I want to highlight about scars that's really important is wherever there's a scar on your body, it's very likely that you are not putting input into the area. You are not stimulating the area, meaning you are not breathing into the area. It's always the case that when you have a scar somewhere, all the underlying muscle tissue is not working at 100%. It's not firing all cylinders. It's not to say that it's not working at all, because that's not true, but it is impeded, it's restricted. So that muscle tissue is not functioning. And in an area where you want to have muscle function, because actually we think about the core as being like right in front of us here, like our 8-pack, that's what we all envision our core is. But our core starts from our spine. It starts from the back, sweeps around into the top of the rib cage, sweeps around into the pubic bone and hip bones, and it really is this kind of wrapping effect with layering of different muscle tissue that creates a stable, solid core. And breathing is highly linked up into this because it's all connected. The diaphragm shares the exact same connection with your pelvic floor, which shares the exact same connection of some of the deep stabilizing muscles of your low back. So that is to keep in mind. Like I said, chronic pain anywhere, like pelvic pain, SI stuff, obviously low back pain, that vulnerability that I just spoke about, huge. But I want you to just think about yourself in this like integrated, holistic way. So if you're a visual person, I think that this is really helpful. If you want to just do a little bit of Googling with me, you are going to Google the anatomy trains. You're going to Google Thomas Myers, anatomy trains, superficial backline. And what this will show you is it'll show you an anatomy skeleton, but there's this really beautiful way that they're representing how the fascia and how the connective tissue, muscle included, is all connected. This helps you to see that the tension that you feel in your neck, like chronic headaches, for example, could be directly related to this scar that you have on your back, because it's quite literally the exact same tissue. We do not work in pieces. We don't have a bicep and then a deltoid muscle and then a tricep. You know, that's not how we actually function. If we moved like one thing at a time, we would be very robotic and very slow. Our body is much more efficient and intelligent and capable than that. So I want you to look that up. Look in the Google Images section so you can really see what it is I'm talking about, because this is going to come up as really important when we go into the energetic and physical considerations. So I was briefly touching on pressure problems. And what I want to share around pressure problems is pressure problems are something that you have going on if you have any kind of scarring from your rib cage down the front of your abdomen to your pelvic floor, like to your tailbone really, like that big sweep of tissue. It could also be on like the sides. Think about that balloon. When you have a scar there from example, giving birth vaginally, or when you have a scar from appendix, or when you have a discectomy scar like we're talking about in this video, what it will do is it will challenge your ability to maintain a ideal like type of pressure in your body. That area, you'll see the Olympics were somewhat recently at the time of the filming of this video, and you see like Olympic weightlifters, they have this kind of belt on their front, like all belted into their torso, because they're trying to work with they're not trying, they're athletes, professional athletes. They're working with their intrinsic pressure so that they can lift a significant, like a crazy amount of weight. So when we have a scar there, it's impeded. It's almost like, think about that balloon-like structure, and then if you were to deflate that balloon and like rub your finger over a certain spot a number of times and then reflate that balloon, there's a weakening of the wall there. A weakening of the wall will start to fiddle with your pressure. So what does the pressure problem actually feel like? You could feel it as incontinence, like of urgency. You could have a challenge with your bowel function, like maybe it's slow, maybe it's fast, because everything here is related and connected. Pressure problems, obviously so, are highly related to your digestive health, which is highly synced up and related to your breathing. Every single breath you take, when the diaphragm is dropping down, you should have this massage-like experience where every single organ down here is getting a massage, as I like to put it, as you breathe down. Because as your diaphragm lowers, there's no longer as much space for the organs where they once had space. So that it starts to push out, like it goes out in all directions, ideally, not just the abdomen pushing forward. But that's like giving a massage. As you exhale, everything gets dragged back up into its more like resting-like position. So when we have pressure problems, we may have challenges with inflammation, with swelling, food intolerances, distension. All of this is very common with pressure problems. And if we just jump up from the breathing and like the lower body stuff that we were just talking about, pressure problems could also be experienced and are commonly experienced in the head and face. So chronic sinus like congestion, seasonal allergies, TMJ, ear stuff, any kind of eye things that are going on, like where you're having puffiness and dark circles under the eyes, that can be because of the scarring that is there. So all of these things are pressure problems. So instead of thinking about, I have this and this and this, and feeling really overwhelmed by this large picture of having like 15, 20, 30 things going on, if we just put it into a category that actually makes sense, calling it just a pressure problem, that's really manageable, because you go, okay, well, I just need to work one thing instead of trying to micromanage my health and well-being, trying to sort out all of these things at once. That doesn't usually go very well. It's expensive, it's time-consuming, and you may not get the results that you are looking for. So pressure problems are huge. And obviously, so like I just said, that knocks on to digestive health, all of the things I just spoke about, and bladder and bowel function. So that's all the physical considerations, or the major ones. Of course, there's so many other things going on, but those are the main ones I want to highlight in this informational video. And if we just jump into the energetic and emotional stuff for a moment. So this is a kind of more abstract section. So again, my invitation is that you hear yourself, hear your story, hear your own symptoms and what I'm describing, because it's gonna resonate a lot more. Instead of me just saying a bunch of stuff that you may or may not feel into, it just becomes words and information, and it is kind of useless that way. So think about what you're feeling, the whole situation around the surgery itself, the before, the during the surgery, and the after. I'll give a 3-part kind of roadmap for that in the what to do phase, which is coming up next. But first, let's just talk about super simple. Let's tack on to the physical considerations when I was talking about the back posterior chain, the extensor chain. The extensor chain obviously propels us forward. That's what it does. When it contracts and we start to do that final push off with our foot to go forward in just like a walking pattern, obviously so bigger scale when we're sprinting, but that's what moves us forward in life. And so if you have scarring on the back of your body, particularly in these large sites like a discectomy, you may feel a challenge or that kind of sense of being stuck, or not quite sure how to move forward in life, or being a little bit stagnant, or even wishy-washy in your decisions, feeling a little bit unstable or uncertain, or just having a little bit of like internal conflict, not quite sure like really where to like put your momentum and energy and like move forward. That's really common with these types of things. So all of this is also kind of expanded upon if we talk about these more Eastern traditions like yoga and Ayurveda, as well as Chinese medicine. So the back channel in the body, which is related to yoga and Ayurveda, is traditionally linked up to the grounded connection with the earth. So if you have a feeling, or you're easily ungrounded, or you don't really just feel grounded in general, you're quite prone to slipping into overwhelm or anxious thoughts, or that whole whirlwind that can kick up so quickly for all of us. It could be because of this. You're having an actual challenge with the connection with earth. And the emotion and the energetic challenges on the whole, what happens when we've been dealing with stuff for a long time is we feel really isolated in how we feel. We start to feel really separate from everything, and we could potentially feel like, we are the only ones who are having this, or we only have these set of things going on and nobody else really understands us. And that keeps us away from our connection with nature, keeps us away from that connection with the earth element. I'm not just talking about putting your hands or your feet in the grass because it feels grounding, it feels nice. I'm talking about really this beautiful, like, harmonious relationship that you can have with nature, with the element of earth, and that's influenced by the back channel. So scarring in that area could obstruct that kind of connection. Also in this kind of world, this yoga and Ayurveda tradition, is we have these energy centers in our body, and one of them is just behind our belly button, in the center of our kind of abdomen here. This energy center is a place where we want to think about cultivating our energy, like thinking like we are kindling a fire that is related to our digestive fire, but also just related to how we circulate and cultivate and harness our own energy. So if you have scarring right there, which is a very common place to have a discectomy, you also may feel impeded. You may have poor digestion, like I just said, but also just challenged to really process stuff out, like prone to getting stuck, prone to being challenged to resolve things all the way. Maybe you're prone to rumination, or getting resentful or bitter, or getting stuck in some sort of like emotional state that doesn't really move or takes a really long time to move. So that's something to think about as well. And then a final piece, if we just dip into another Eastern tradition, which is Chinese medicine, there's a acupuncture energetic meridian channel in the back of your body. It's the only one that's back there, and it's the longest one. If you were to go to an acupuncturist or a Chinese medical doctor, there's, I think, the most points that you can connect with on the back channel there, and it's related to the bladder. So I'm not a Chinese medical doctor by any means. I'm just geeking out, self-study, and just sharing a little bit of information with you so that you can explore these things more deeply. Google is a great place to start. Google's also an awful place to try to get really good quality information. But hopefully it kicks up a little bit of interest around all of these things are not just physical. They are part of our experience and part of how we can connect with ourselves in a deeper way moving forward through these challenges. So a lot of the emotions that I was kind of talking about, like that inner conflict, unsupported, wishy-washy kind of thing, can be related to this meridian in its like simplest form. There's obviously a lot more to all of these things that I spoke about and the energetic and emotional connections here, but that's just a little 101 that I want to offer you here. All right, let's go to the third section. Let's do what to do. So the what to do is your actionable steps. You have something that you can do for every single scar, and I highly suggest that you do. It's so important that you don't skip over this step because very likely you don't recognize the importance of scars, and maybe you're just coming to realize now how influential this scar is, how it's contributing to a lot of the things that you're feeling. That means that you don't want to skip over steps. That means you don't want to rush. That means you don't want to force yourself through things. You want to actually do the opposite. You want to recognize, acknowledge, reflect, and move really slowly through things in a way that is honoring and respectful of your body, of your timeline, and of you and your process. So the three-part guided practice is something that I offer as a preliminary step for every single scar. Please don't do more than one at once because it can feel overwhelming. Just do one at a time, and I'll just lay out the 3 phases for you super simply. Phase 1, the relaxing into. You need to do 4 things. The first thing is be comfortable somewhere. Go somewhere in your home where you feel like you can spend a bit of time. You're not jumping on a Zoom meeting right away or rushing out to get the kids or any of those things. Give yourself 10 to 20 minutes to just really settle into a practice that's really going to be quite meaningful. Sit or lay, again, however you're comfortable. The second or the third thing here may depend on how you choose to sit or lay, because the third thing I want you to do is to make skin-to-skin contact, meaning you're going to take your hand and touch the area. If you feel like your shoulder mobility is not so hot and you can't get there, that's okay, but touch is really important here. Why is touch really important? Because touch is a sense that we need to activate and build a relationship with our body. So this is the entrance into that. We want to activate the sense of touch. It's the only sense in our body that's bidirectional, meaning both things are receiving benefit. All the other senses are just one way. They're one-way highways. Touch is not. So you want to touch the area skin to skin and make sure that you're touching it in a way that is impactful. It's not just like Kendra told me to, so I'm just going to touch myself in this really, not very, impactful way. I want you to say something to yourself, maybe a prayer, or just say something in your mind out loud, whatever, that says something along the lines of, I'm about to touch an area that has caused me challenge or suffering or pain, whatever it is, and I'm now choosing to start to look into that. I'm now choosing to acknowledge that I want to change something. And that's your kind of first step. It's such an important step to do. And when you just get that, when you nail it, when you feel it, the whole practice becomes a lot more meaningful. So the fourth thing that I would like you to do is just close your eyes. Close your eyes, tone down that sense, ramp up touch, and that's your whole relaxing into phase. So the second phase is the physical considerations that you want to gather around that scar. So you're going to need to, again, touch the area so you can feel it physically. And I want you to get a sense of how, for example, sensitive it is. Is it hypersensitive? Is it numb? Temperature, is it hot? Is it cold? Do you have an aversion to touching it? Do you feel nauseous? Do you feel icky? Do you feel lightheaded? Do you feel uncomfortable? Does it bring up something? All of these things need to be considered. And then the most obvious thing with the physical is you want to feel into areas of tension, pinching, where it's stuck, feeling that like anchoring on to bone that I was talking about earlier, and really just connecting with it and getting a sense of what's going on in the area. How much can I feel? Knowing that the more you touch in, you feel the area, the more you'll be able to feel. If you have not felt your body like this before, it's going to feel foreign and it's going to be hard. And that's okay, because the only way to make things easier is by doing them more often. The third section of this 3-part practice is the emotional and energetic consideration. So everything I spoke about inside that phase that I just mentioned, as well as this 3-part roadmap. So when you're thinking about this discectomy scar, I want you to think about it in 3 phases. The first one, everything that happened before the surgery. Think about the pain. Think about what you stopped being able to do. How did that impact you? What was your inner dialogue? What was your kind of general predominant emotion? Were you reactive? Were you feeling angry? All of these things. The whole thing. Emotion, energy, the vibe, all of it. Then you want to go into the during. The during is the surgery itself. Fear is always involved with the surgery because surgery is scary. Especially in that area, there's a big list of stuff that may go wrong that the surgeons and nurses and all of those people will read out to you, rightfully so, because you need to know, but just the whole process is kind of overwhelming. So there's that, as well as dynamics between relationships, people who are taking care of you, bringing you to and from the hospital, hospital staff, all of that needs to be considered. The third part is the after, everything that has happened from the healing process to present day. Again, it's kind of like just feeling into all the stuff that I spoke about in the before phase, but bringing it forward to now. So this phase can be potentially very long, especially if the surgery is old. You want to consider all of these things and really, really kind of get a sense of what's going on now, like what's happening in your emotion, really recognizing like what are you feeling, related to this. There could be I've seen it all. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. All of it's valid, and you need to acknowledge and just be aware of that. Now, what do we do for this scar? Spinal discectomy. So, like I said, it's most common that you'll have it in your low back. Another common place would be to having it in your neck. It's very unlikely that you have it in your thoracic spine because you have ribs in the way, and it's in some regards, there's a lot less range of motion and it's a lot more protected by the ribs in the thorax kind of rib cage. So it's usually the joint health there, or at least like the way that we can manage it from a medical perspective is greatly reduced. So for that reason, we're going to do something that is probably familiar. We're going to do cat-cow. However, you're going to do cat-cow with an emphasis on moving your thoracic spine. I don't want you to fall into the patterns of over moving your low back and neck, meaning like don't look up at the ceiling with an extreme amount of extension, and don't like fall into this like overdone movement of the pelvis and low back. I want you to try to get the middle, the in-between area, the thoracic spine moving. So the range of motion when you do it this way will be reduced. That's okay. You're just moving a different part of your body that, like I said, has less range of motion, but there's 12 vertebrae there. There's 7 in the neck, 5 in the low back, and 12 here. So to get those articulating and moving will greatly help the health of everything above and below it. So you can do that 6 to 10 times on a daily basis and see how that starts to change all of these things. See how it affects your energy, your mood, all of these physical things that we spoke about. And then if you have any questions around how to move forward from this point, please know you can always ask me questions. I'm very active inside this community, and you can just write it inside the chat box here. If you have a question now, you're welcome to just type it out. But it was very great to spend time with you and shed light on this really common scar and how to really work with it, at least in a preliminary step, so that you can move forward from a lot of these well-being challenges. So it was great to be here with you, and I will see you later this week for another live. Bye.